Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for everyone that has joined the conference today. It's over 4,000 people. That's amazing for a conference like this. And it just goes to show that there's still a wonderful, rich community out there, people that still want to learn. And, Teams Nation is bringing it to us today. So I'm happy to present. I've done this conference a couple of times in the past, but haven't done it. I didn't do it last year. Not sure why. Just happened to work out that way. But happy to be back and doing this conference again. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Liz Sundet, and I am a Microsoft Program Manager. I've been focusing largely on Viva for the last year, specifically Viva Connections, although I do get into a little bit of some of the other areas and knowing what's happening with some of those other areas as well. Traditionally, I grew up in SharePoint. I've been working with SharePoint since 2000, about 2007. The first version of SharePoint that I worked on was 2003 version. And then all of the versions up until 2013, and then I kind of switched over into more of the SharePoint Online, Office 365, all of those types of things, and then eventually into Teams. So now I work in the product group for OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and very happy to be presenting this today. I did travel quite extensively across the world, into Europe, all of those types of places, doing conferences, doing outreach, trying to make sure that I meet as many people as I possibly can, and inspiring different people along this journey of technology that we are embarking on. So lots and lots of different travel types of things. When I'm at home, I have two fur babies, Deuce and Piper. Deuce is showing on the screen here, two boxers. And so if you get a little barking in the background, that means that the garbage man is here to pick up the rubbish for today. It happens, right, when you're all working from home. So that's a little bit about me, and I am ready to kick this off, and let's get started with, Viva Connections. So there is a playbook that is out there, and already have it set up on docs.microsoft.com, this guide to setting up Viva Connections. It's 8 steps. So the first 7 steps are all about the technology, all about deploying the technology, all about configuring, getting the right settings, all of those types of things. So really easy as far as the technology. The really hard part, and the hard part that we're going to be talking about today, is really this last step. And that is to help make end users aware of Viva Connections as this new resource, and then provide guidance on what the icon in the Teams app bar is, your organization's instance of that Viva Connections, help users understand how to use the desktop experience, all of that type of stuff. That's the hard part in Viva Connections, really. It is not a technology hard type of focus. We're not, running PowerShell. We're not, doing massive transformations of data. We're not migrating anything. You might have to do some of that work up front to get to a modern communication site in SharePoint Online. But really, once you're past those parts, deploying Viva Connections, you got, setting the home site, setting some global navigation, doing a couple of little turning on things and saying, hey, we're pitting this app to Teams, go out and use it. Then the hard part begins, is really where we're launching with our end users. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. That's what we're going to be talking about today, because this is really the hard experience that most people need to take and keep into mind when they are working with end users. And the first thing that I really think we need to do is consider the company culture in all of the adoption plans and all of the change management plans, all the communications plans that we are working with. Really hone in on what is that culture of the organization? When are groups going to be using this new technology? Have you gone out and sat with those end users and really analyzed, what they're doing and how they might adopt these different technology types of things? What resources do you need to develop in order to support this? Maybe it's just, some Q&A, basic types of training. Other times it might be, hey, you need to have, some people that are really working with these end users, really shadowing these end users, asking them questions, all of those types of things, so that they get a better sense of adoption and better sense of, desire to move to this new technology. What's in it for them? What channels would you be looking to create awareness and drive that enthusiasm throughout the organization? We'll talk a little bit more about channels, and then we'll talk a little bit more about roles, because there's so many, different types of roles. What messages and programs need to be rolled out to those different points along a different timeline into those different roles within the organization as well? And so, considering all of this and putting it together, one of the ways in which to really create good communications plans is to lay it out in what I call an ad card change management approach. All of the tactics being laid out, being targeted to those different audiences. The picture here is really just a small sample that could be created, and it allows you to use different tactics when you see something maybe isn't working. The best ones that I've seen by organizations have over 50 different tactics that they are using with different ad car channels, different awareness descriptions for each of these, different targets for different roles within all of that. Laying it out this way allows you to pick and choose those different options. Say maybe, hey, guess what? We tried posters during the last implementation. It didn't really work. Can we try something different this time? Maybe, let's take a look at our change management model that is something relative to this and allows us to, kind of work with, hey, how our end users are adapting and how they want to be communicated with. How do we want to adopt this? And this is, great in a pilot stage when you're kind of figuring out what are all those communications, what are all those messages that I'm going to have to be working with those end users. Definitely recommend something of this sort. It can be a list, it can be a form, it can be, a number of different mediums. It's important to have this available to be able to tap into and pick some type of a strategy that fits that model of change and fits that organization's culture, right? Because that's that living, breathing organism that you want to make sure that you are working with at every single phase of the life cycle. We talked about different roles within this. Another thing that people really need to look at as part of all of those new roles that are going to be involved is to really look at your corporate intranet's governance strategy and make sure that you look at it in terms of updating for any changes. Things like, how often do you post news articles? Who's going to be posting those news articles? What metrics are you going to look at for success? What metrics are you going to look at before you choose to boost a particular news post or an article? How do you get feedback on your intranet? Are all things, that you're going to want to look at and rewrite into your governance? And I know so many people think about governance as kind of one of those last things that we do, not the first thing that we do when we're doing planning and execution of something like Viva Connections. But this is so vitally important that you at least take a look at your governance strategy from this one singular question. And I get asked this almost every single time that I work with a client. Who owns your intranet? Who should own your intranet? Well, usually when I get asked this question, I get some absolute cheers of praise, and then I get some deer in the headlights kind of looks. And it's by the two different people that are in the audience usually. And I usually answer this question, who owns your intranet? And I said, well, it shouldn't be your IT department. And the IT department goes, yes, we no longer own the intranet. That's awesome. That's great. Liz said so. And the rest of the people in the audience give me the deer in the headlights look like, oh my gosh, if IT's not owning it, that means somebody else in this room is owning it. Yeah, it should be expanding into those different lines of business. It's expanding into marketing, into HR, into corporate communications. Whoever is in charge of owning that intranet should be in charge of all of those governance types of questions as well. Hey, how often are you going to post news posts? Who's going to be doing the news posting? Who's going to be doing the boosting? All of those types of things. IT is too far removed from what is happening and to be able to curate all of the things that are happening within the organization to really own their piece of the intranet. You know, I could make a case for marketing, HR, corporate communications, any one of those. It could be a by committee. So you have a multitude of different types of roles within these lines of business that do own your intranet, but it should be a decision that is made up front as part of that governance strategy. Who is going to own that corporate intranet? And then move forward from there in terms of creating a wonderful employee experience that everybody can use. Okay, so let's look at more of that wonderful employee experience, and let's start by examining really the frontline workers. Now, I have met some wonderful, wonderful frontline workers. I've worked with them, highly talented people. But the first thing we really need to realize in terms of not only the frontline workers, but from an entire organization perspective, is we've got this almost trending to a mobile first workforce. All right. My last vacation that I went on, guess what? I didn't bring a computer. I brought a reader, you know, like a little tablet, Fire type of tablet type of thing. And then I brought my mobile device, so my cell phone, right? And you know, can't leave home without a cell phone. Can't get through the airport without a cell phone. You know, because I keep all of my tickets and all that type of stuff on that. But we are really transforming to that mobile first workforce. So we might have to rethink how our intranet items are going to look on that mobile device, right? How do our news posts show up on a mobile device? Can people interact with that mobile device in a news post? You know, make comments on that news post, like the news post, all of those types of things. And is that in kind of their regular way they want to work? You know, there's many times where I take a meeting from my vehicle with having, you know, Teams up and running and, you know, take the meeting right from there. You know, does it make it a little bit harder to go on mute because nobody wants to hear the car, you know, noise and all of that type of stuff from over the meeting? Yeah, a little bit, but it's not too bad. And especially I do this if I don't have to talk a whole lot or present or run the meeting. I'm just kind of listening in, gathering some details, all of that type of stuff. Yeah, I can do that from my mobile device because we're now in that kind of weird state of some of us are going back to work. I know Sarah and I talked about, you know, she just did her first, you know, client interaction. You know, yeah, I don't like driving either, driving home after all of that kind of, you know, long days worth of meetings and, you know, face-to-face time and all that type of stuff. But I can still get to my resources that might be on my mobile device. So we're going to have to re-examine how our users are interacting with their intranet while on that mobile device, how they are working on those mobile devices, because it's going to make a huge difference in terms of how we display our intranet resources in those employee experiences, such as Viva Connections. All right. And then we have to really look at these new roles. You have frontline workers, great case in point in terms of these new roles that are hitting our organizations. These are people that have traditionally been on what we call shop floors, or, in the retail storefronts, those types of areas that, hey, they're not necessarily on computers every day. They might work with some computers to run some equipment, all of those types of things. But many of them don't even have email addresses within an organization. So how do we engage them? How do we enable them to make sure that they understand how to use a technology that is now 5 years old, Microsoft Teams, celebrated his birthday last week, all of those types of things. How do we enable these people to be able to use Microsoft Teams, be able to log in? If they don't even have an email address, how do we get them to log in? All of those types of things. So our end user training might have to start at a basic level of how to log into Teams. When we are thinking about rolling out something like Viva Connections and the greater employee experience, just being able to log into Teams and then have them be able to be shown a couple of different things within Teams. And guess what? What I found is these people are brilliant adopters of new technology simply because they can find some of these new problems to solve with this technology that they never used before. I had an example of a customer that I was working with, and they, had a number of people that went live on a pilot, about 140 people from their manufacturing, sort of shop floor areas of their company. And, had these people start using Teams, just showed them what the, Teams, Viva Connections, being able to get to your intranet, all of that type of stuff. And they started messaging people back and forth, in different departments. It was easier than calling them. They could see when they were online, all of these types of things, and started using that and said, hey, we need everybody from the shop floor on this, like right now. Even if you don't deploy all of the, employee experience, the Viva Connection stuff for them, we need everybody on Teams, because we're starting to use this for a very different way than what you intended us to be able to use it for in terms of Viva Connections and getting to our employee intranet and employee resources. We're now using it, for creating teams of people that are working on a specific project. We're being able to, message different people for different things that we need. And it's working out really, really nicely for us. So they actually added about 2,000 people at, a stage that was kind of in an interim before, the pilot was really over and the go live really was starting to begin. They added 2,000 people from their manufacturing frontline workers space into the Microsoft Teams instance, simply so that they could use it in a way that was solving problems that, hey, we didn't have to leave our line, shut it down, walk over to another line, look at what was happening, all of those types of things, to be able to solve a problem. We could be there, right with them, have a camera time with them to be able to help solve the problem and troubleshoot it. So these are brilliant adopters of that particular technology. So, make sure that we look at those frontline workers, look at those new roles within our organization, and then really how they want to adopt technology. We need to be able to pivot to some of the ways that they are looking to learn this technology. And one of the things that I would say is make sure, if you are honing in on those frontline workers, keep things simple, especially when it comes to training. Don't try and boil the ocean as far as like everything that they need to do. Give them one simple way of getting into this stuff. They will figure it out. Eventually they will start adopting it and asking questions and all of those types of things in whole new ways. But at first, keep it simple. I like the keep it simple silly, keep it silly simple, keep it simple Sally or Sam. You can also use deploy that KISS methodology to make sure that everything that you do is very, very simple. And really your communications, your adoption doesn't need to be, uber complex. And actually, same organization that I worked with was, a simple QR code that was on a poster. Very, very simple in, how they deployed this out. Just give them a QR code. The poster was like a 9x9 poster. Put it up in common areas, by the water coolers, lunch rooms, all of those types of things. And people would come by, they would scan with their mobile device that QR code. That QR code then took them to a video. And that video was a display of what they would see in their new employee experience by using Viva Connections. Very, very simple in how they deployed this, very simple in how they got the message out, create that excitement, create that awareness, all of those types of things. And they actually had about an 88% success rate with people in the organization clicking on this QR code. They actually figure it's higher than that because there might be a couple of people that have clicked on it a number of times and watched the video with friends, shared it with different people. But they had, a huge success rate within their organization. And this was the first time that they had experimented with this type of an adoption methodology to really, communicate the change to the organization and drive some awareness, drive some desire, maybe drive a little bit of the how-tos as well, because after the video played, they could join a community that would give them a whole bunch of training items and that type of thing. So had it, really seamless going from one to another in terms of the ad car model and going through all of those methods of, those different letters and how that's laid out. So, really something that was this simple, ended up being so impactful that they decided to use this for a number of different technology rollouts in that organization. So it wasn't just something that they tried, it worked, but, hey, we're not going to do it again. No, this has become kind of a standard for that particular organization to be doing over and over and over again with those frontline workers. So there's other ideas as well. I've been one that have always said, hey, you put up posters in the bathroom, you've got a captive audience for at least a couple of minutes. Sometimes that goes over okay. Sometimes it does not go over as well, simply because of the corporate culture that you have to think about. It's just kind of, no, we want to keep the bathrooms just the bathrooms. But I like the idea of putting it up into a captive audience place. We have elevators, we have lifts in our organization, and pretty much everybody in the whole entire company has to ride an elevator to go to the different floors, take the lift to a different floor. So we're going to put posters in those areas because guess what? We have a captive audience. Absolutely. Works great. Posters are great. Videos, I like to hone in on many different learning styles. So if it's not a poster, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a town hall, maybe it's some simple training that you want to think about and talk about. It could be as easy as setting up a, coffee shop where people come in and, you say, hey, I'd like to show you something. It'll take about 5 minutes of your time. You can have a cup of coffee that you can take to work with you, and set that up in, a very common area. I've seen the coffee shop model where, right in the front of the building, in the lobby area where you come in, set up a couple of, lounge areas with some coffee and have, a laptop or a tablet and be showing them, hey, this is what's coming. I want to get your feedback while you enjoy a cup of coffee, or while we're making the coffee for you, just that couple of minutes. And then when your coffee is ready, you can sit and talk with us more if you'd like, or, make it a great day and go off to work. Something of that sort, those simple training sessions that can be very, very impactful and capture a large number of people just because they're interested, not just for the coffee, but maybe for some of the talk as well. Having common questions posted to gain awareness, gain some knowledge, creating a community, all of these types of things are great to be able to do for creating those adoption, that change management, honing in on a number of different users to be able to look at what you have as far as deploying something like that employee experience with Viva Connections. One of the things that I like to think about when I'm doing any kind of communications is to remember the rule of 7 and communicate 7 times, 7 ways. There's a great LinkedIn article on this to be able to really hone in on this strategy. It is a sales strategy, but it's great for communications. And the rule is very simple: 7 times. So 7 ways that we are going to communicate over and over and over and over again. So 7 times in 7 ways. And I'm going to be 49 this year, so that's 7 times 7s, which is great. I can remember that, as a 7 times 7, rule of 7 there. One of my favorite girl crushes happens to be 7 of 9. Love that character on Star Trek. Yes, I am one of those Star Trek people. One of my favorite movies happens to be The Sound of Music. 7 children, right? There's 7 days in a week. We've got the Pleiades sisters that are, seven sisters in a star constellation. However you want to remember this, it could be a movie reference, could be a number of different things. Remember that rule of 7, because it's great if we can really hone in on creating the messages, creating the communication 7 times, 7 ways for a successful communications plan. All right. We've talked a lot about the frontline workers. What are some of those types of things that we can do for the frontline workers? Let's shift a little bit and talk about those remote and hybrid workers next, because guess what? Their roles are changing too. I've been a remote worker for most of my career, all of my career at Microsoft. Before that, I was an independent consultant, worked for a couple of consulting firms, was largely at home. I've been working from home since about 2007. So really when the pandemic hit and everybody was like, oh my gosh, I got to work from home now, I was like, yeah, I got this. Been doing this for a long time, actually had to mentor some people on, actually had to mentor my husband on learning how to work from home, and that the TV needs to be off. You can't sit in a lounge chair. I'm going to set you up a desk with all of the things that you need, and yeah, it took him a couple of weeks, but he eventually got, this whole working from home type of thing. So these people also need to feel engaged, because guess what? They're not going to be in the office, or if they are in the office, they're really in the office, just for, maybe a couple of days a week, and are working kind of that hybrid. Maybe they'll go back to work full time. I know there's many people that I work with that are like, hey, I can't wait to get back in the office because my kids are driving me nuts after, a certain time of day. Whatever those choices may be, there's a lot more flexibility in our organizations nowadays to be able to take on, that remote, that hybrid, that full-time in the office, whatever state of being that you want to be able to work in, But what does that mean in terms of impact to our corporate intranets? Well, if you asked anybody pre-pandemic, what was the number one thing that you went to your intranet for, they would tell me flat out every single day, I go to my corporate intranet every single day for the lunch menu. Awesome. How does that make a remote worker feel engaged? Hmm. Myself included. I was opening up Viva Connections on my mobile device for Microsoft yesterday, and I noticed, they're like, "Hey, check out the lunch menu in the cafe that's closest to you." Well, Microsoft's got this wonderful campus. There's cafes everywhere that you can go and get lunch, you can go and get snacks, you can go get breakfast, any of those types of things throughout the day while you're working in those offices. The nearest cafe to me is 1,400 miles away because I don't live in greater Seattle. I don't even live in the Pacific Northwest. I am in the Midwest of the United States. And so lunch menu, seeing what's being served in the cafe or what cafe is closest to me probably isn't going to be the number one thing that I'm going to go to my intranet or to my Viva Connections for. So how do we reshape this? How do we re-envision this? We might have to rethink what our intranet resources are, right? And so it might be that we want to show what the weather is. It might be that we want to show, hey, there's this top news card that just came out last week, just rolled out. Maybe that's a better option in terms of what we want to display on this top news, because it might make our remote workers, our hybrid workers feel like, hey, this is really meant for me, or this is meant for a large portion of our organization. We can boost articles, that have that tendency that, hey, everybody in the company needs to be seeing when our signups for our benefits are. We need to boost this article because this is going to be remaining on kind of those top news within the organization for a number of different weeks. And that's how that all seamlessly works together, is we can boost that news article, we can set the date in which that it's going to be boosted, and then have that showing up in that top news card. And so all of these things are different techniques in terms of those rethinking how we look at those intranet resources. And then I would say one of the number one things that we can look at is to also use audience targeting. Users want to see the information that is really personalized to them. And with SharePoint and Viva Connections features, the users can have that robust experience that really fits what they need to be able to see, rather than filtering it kind of all of the information from their company for themselves and saying, yeah, I want to choose this, but not necessarily this. So I would highly recommend to consider audience targeting with those news posts, with that navigation, training your users on connecting with different communities in Yammer, and then following those different sites for a richer experience that is part of that Viva Connections employee experience. And what shows up on my feed, what shows up on my dashboard, can all be kind of focused for that individual user based on those roles, based on where they're at, based on, where they are located in the world, really, not only within the company itself. So, use all of those different types of techniques to be able to hone in and target on those users. And please remember, along this journey, this is a very, very hard thing. It will take up so much time, way more time than planning out any kind of deployment of Viva Connections, any kind of deployment of any of the Viva, the employee experiences. Remember that this journey of adoption is that everyone, the people that are implementing the intranet, the first line workers, those remote hybrid workers, you're all going through an incredible amount of change. And one of the biggest things to remember with is communicating all along the way in a way that they really understand. That goes back to that 7 times 7 ways. I might be communicating a little bit different for those different audiences because they understand different language, they understand different ways of how to use these types of things, and being very, very relational to them. it really helps solidify all of the change that you're going through. So it might mean that you have to change the way you communicate, or really get in tune and understanding what world they are in order to communicate with them. Okay, so I'm at the end of my session. We've got about 5 minutes left for any questions. I do want to say thank you for everyone. I would love it if you would give me some feedback on what you thought about the session today. And, happy to take that feedback from the organizers of the conference. Look at that QR code, simple, easy, and we already talked about this. So hopefully that will become part of your adoption plans very, very soon. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. If we have any questions, I'm happy to take questions.